Before today's video, don't forget to subscribe so you don't miss out on the latest videos. If you want to see a case or topic covered by Paranormally Listed, then go to criminallylisted.com and fill out the questionnaire under the Suggest a Case tab. Number 3. The Trabuco Gold Treasure. In 1933, a group of Mexican businessmen had a meeting in Cuernavaca, Mexico. Attendees included international banker Rafael Borga, millionaire Leon Trabuco, and ranchers Ricardo Ortega and Carlos Sepulveda. They were meeting because they wanted to hatch a plan that would make them millions. According to economics professor Guzman Murata, the United States was about to raise the price of gold by $10 per ounce. At the time, gold was $20.67 per ounce. The men planned to buy as much gold as they could in Mexico and smuggle it into the United States. Then, after gold prices went up, they would sell. The plan was risky because the men could face jail time if they were caught smuggling the gold into the United States. Nevertheless, the men started buying gold from small-time gold miners. They also bought jewelry and gold coins, which they melted down in their makeshift foundries into gold ingots. It's believed that the men accumulated 16 tons of gold. Trabuco went to the United States to find a place to store all the gold, but he could not find anything suitable for them. So Trabuco decided to bury the gold. According to legend, Trabuco chose a spot in a desert in New Mexico near the Ute and Navajo Native reservations. In July 1933, Trabuco hired a pilot named Red Mosier to fly to Farmington, New Mexico. Allegedly, Mosier made 16 flights with a ton of gold each trip. After the gold was flown in, it was transported by truck to an unknown location. Only Trabuco knew where the gold was hidden. As Guzman Murata predicted, gold prices soared, and the men quickly made $7 million. $7 million is just over $166 million in 2024. The men thought that the price of gold would keep rising, so they didn't sell, and they held on to the gold. This proved to be a big mistake. In January 1934, President Franklin D. Roosevelt signed the controversial Gold Reserve Act of 1934. The Gold Reserve Act made it illegal to hoard gold and sell it privately. Keeping anything over $100 worth of gold was a criminal offense. Any amount over that would have to be transferred to the U.S. Treasury in exchange for $35 per ounce. This would have made them a profit, but they couldn't exchange the gold because they had illegally smuggled it into the country. So they kept the 16 tons of gold buried in the New Mexico desert. In the following 5 years, 3 of the 4 men who accumulated the gold died. The sole survivor was Leon Trabuco. He was the only one who knew where the gold was buried. He supposedly never told anyone the location of the gold, nor did he draw a map. In 1946, the American government launched a massive investigation into gold smuggling and violations of the Gold Reserve Act. They learned about Leon Trabuco's gold. They told him to show them where the gold was buried and that he could try to sue to be the rightful owner of the gold. Instead of cooperating with the authorities, Trabuco fled to Spain and never revealed the location of the gold. It's not known when Leo Trabuco died, but what is known is that he took the secret of the gold's location to his grave. In 1971, President Richard Nixon ended the Gold Reserve Act and created the current currency system in which money isn't converted into gold. At the time of this recording, it's believed that the gold is still buried in the New Mexico desert. Despite the best efforts of treasure hunters, not a single piece of treasure has been found in the 90 years since it was buried. One treasure hunter, Ed Foster, thinks he has found clues to the treasure's location. He believes he found the landing strip that Red Mosier used for his 16 flights. Foster said that there's a landing strip on a 7-mile plateau in Conger Mesa in San Juan County, New Mexico. Some Navajo people who were living in the area said that they saw a plane land there many times in 1933. They also said many Mexican men were living in the area at the time. 20 miles from the Conger Mesa landing strip, Foster found a unique building. There are several Navajo buildings in the area, and this one does not resemble those buildings. Instead, it looks like a house that was commonly found in Mexico. It has windows, both a front and back door, and a veranda. Foster believes it was built for guards Trabuco hired to protect the gold. Another clue that Foster found is 28 miles from the Mexican-style house. It is an engraving on a shrine rock. The engraving reads 1933 16-ton. However, it's possible that the engraving was created as a hoax. Nevertheless, Foster is convinced that the gold is located somewhere in the triangle of all those 3 locations. But is this all just an urban legend and there is no treasure? Or did Leon Trabuco dig up the gold and sell it after his co-conspirators died? Unless the treasure is found, we may never know for sure. If Trabuco's treasure is real, the value of the gold would be around $1.1 billion at the time of this recording. Number 2. The Lost Dutchman's Gold. There's a lot of mystique surrounding the legend of the Lost Dutchman's Gold. But this is what we know. In the 1840s, the Peralta family developed a lucrative gold mine in the Superstition Mountains east of Phoenix, Arizona. The Peralta family were from northern Mexico, and they would bring the gold back to Mexico. In 1884, while traveling to Mexico, they were ambushed by a group of Apache. Most of the Peraltas were killed. Only 2 escaped with their lives. After the attack, maps with the location of the mine began to surface. Some of the mines were said to have been drawn by people who knew its location or had worked there, but they were considered hoaxes because people who used the maps could not find the mine. Other people claimed they had found it, but then they couldn't find it again. Then others encountered some disaster after they claimed they found it, and they never returned. For 30 years, the mine was seemingly lost. Then, in the 1870s, a German prospector named Jacob Waltz arrived in Phoenix with a lot of gold ore. Although Waltz was German and not from the Netherlands, his nickname was Dutchman. He was called Dutchman because another name for Germany is Deutschland, so they called him Deutschman or Dutchman. Waltz, or Dutchman, and his partner, Jacob Weiser, claimed they had found the Peralta's family mine. They said the mine was in the Superstition Mountains near Weaver's Needle, a known landmark in the Arizona desert. For years, Walter and Weiser worked the mine without revealing its location. At some point, Jacob Weiser disappeared. Waltz claimed that he was killed when Apache attacked them, but there's some speculation that Waltz killed Weiser. During the latter part of Waltz's life, after his house was washed away in a flood, he lived in Phoenix with a baker named Julia Thomas. Waltz gave Thomas hints about where the mine was, but he never told her exactly where it was. In October 1891, Thomas left 81-year-old Jacob Waltz in the care of one of her neighbors. When Thomas returned, Waltz was dead and the neighbor was gone. Also missing was a box with 48 pounds of gold ore. That is about $1.6 million in today's gold prices. There is some speculation that the neighbor killed Waltz and stole the gold ore. After Waltz's death, 29-year-old Julia Thomas decided to use the information Waltz gave her to find the gold mine. She sold her bakery and hired a team to search for the mine. They set out for the Superstition Mountains in the summer of 1892. However, they only spent 3 weeks prospecting because the heat became too intense and they were running out of fresh water. In an ironic twist, Thomas and her team overlooked 2 gold mines. The Black Queen and Mammoth mines were discovered a year after their expedition in 1893 by Morris Hawks and the Merrill brothers from Colorado. More than $3 million worth of gold was mined from those deposits. Julia Thomas returned to Phoenix feeling defeated, but she realized her connection to the legend of the Dutchman's gold mine was still valuable. Using all the money left over from the failed expedition, Thomas created maps she claimed led to the Dutchman's gold mine and sold them. Of course, the maps were fake since she didn't know where the mine was. After Waltz's death, the legend of the lost mine continued to grow. Newspapers started printing stories about the mine. Some of the articles gave what they claimed were hints, like it was near a 1,000-foot rock or a cabin in a cave. But since no one knew the location, the hints weren't much help. Amateur prospectors got caught up in the frenzy. One amateur prospector in 1931 may have been the person closest to finding the legendary mine. Some believe he may have actually found it. Adolph Ruth and his son had done prospect work in the California deserts but never found any gold. While Ruth's son was in Mexico for work, he found a map that supposedly led to the Dutchman's gold mine. In June 1931, 66-year-old Adolph Ruth took the map and traveled alone to the Superstition Mountains. He did not return, and a search party was sent out, but Ruth was not found. Months after Adolph Ruth went missing, on January 8, 1932, campers found a message in a bottle floating down the Salt River. The message reads, quote, "I'm sitting under a tree in a creek with leg broke. I've got to have help quick. Finder of this note, please give to Howard Peterson, Ruth. P.S. Have found the lost Dutchman." The note led many people to believe that Adolph Ruth was dead. The newspaper, the Arizona Republic, sponsored a search to find Ruth's body. 5 days into the search, in December 1932, one of the searchers with dogs found Ruth's skull. It was under a tree. The rest of his remains and personal possessions were spread out over 3/4 of a mile from the skull. There was a large hole in the skull. The medical examiner believed that the hole was made by a gunshot with an Army-style .44 caliber revolver. The medical examiner noted that one of his legs was broken, just as it was indicated in the message. This has all led to speculation that Ruth broke his leg and someone came across him and shot him in the head, possibly so that they could steal the map to the mine. People searched the area close to where the remains were found, but they did not find a mine or a map. Over 90 years later, the question remains, did Adolph Ruth find the Dutchman's gold mine? People are still searching for the mine today. If it's out there, and it's as Jacob Waltz described it, it contains about $13 billion worth of gold. Number 1. The Lost Treasure of the Beale Ciphers. This is the only treasure on the list where the directions to find it have been written down. You may be wondering, if there are directions, why is it considered lost? The problem is that the directions are written in a cipher that no one has figured out yet. But before we get to the cipher, we should talk about how the treasure came to be. In 1818, a group of 30 men from Virginia, led by Thomas J. Beale, went on a hunting expedition in the Western Plains. In the Rocky Mountains, in what is now Colorado, the men stumbled upon a sizable gold and silver deposit. The men mined the deposit for several years, then they returned to Virginia with their riches. But at the time, there were problems with having that much gold and silver. For one, there wasn't anyone to sell that quantity of precious metals to. Also, people knew you had substantial wealth, you could be targeted for crime. So Beale chose to bury his gold in the mountains of Bedford, Virginia. While Beale was lucky with the deposit, he was not a miner. He was a hunter and planned to hunt buffaloes in the western plains. Not wanting his fortune to get into the wrong hands, Beale created 3 ciphers. The first cipher supposedly reveals the location of the treasure. The second is the contents of the treasure. The final cipher lists the men who own the treasure and their next of kin. In 1822, just before he set off for Colorado, Thomas Beale left an iron box with an innkeeper named Robert Morris in Lynchburg, Virginia. Beale instructed Robert not to open his box unless he or one of his men did not return within 10 years to collect it. Months later, Beale sent Robert a letter from St. Louis, Missouri. In the letter, Beale promised a friend would send the key to solve the ciphers. Unfortunately for Robert Morris, he never received that key. Robert did what he was asked, and then some, because he waited over 20 years for Beale or one of his men to collect the box, but no one ever came. So in 1845, Robert opened the iron box. Inside, he found 2 plain text letters from Beale and 3 encrypted cipher pages. Morris did not understand what he was looking at, so he gave the pages to a wealthy friend. The unnamed wealthy friend solved the second cipher. The decoded message reads, quote, I deposited in the county of Bedford, about 4 miles from Beaufort's, in an excavation or vault, 6 feet below the surface of the ground, the following articles belonging jointly to the parties, whose names are given in number 3 herewith. The first deposit consisted of 1,014 pounds of gold and 3,812 pounds of silver, deposited November 1819. The second was made December 1821 and consisted of 1,907 pounds of gold and 1,288 of silver. Also, jewels obtained in St. Louis exchange to save transportation and valued at $13,000. The above is securely packed in iron pots with iron covers. The vault is roughly lined with stone, and the vessels rest on solid stone and are covered with others. Paper number 1 describes the exact locality of the vault so that no difficulty will be had in finding it. The man who solved it had determined it was a book cipher. A book cipher is written using a text, like a book, for the key, and then the key is written with numbers that indicate a letter or word in the book. In this case, the key was the United States Declaration of Independence. He determined the number represented the first letter in the word. For example, the first number in the ciphertext is 115, and the 115th word in the Declaration of Independence is instituted. So the first letter is I. The second letter is 73, and the 73rd word in the Declaration is hold, so that means 73 is an H. However, Beale used a slightly different version of the Declaration of Independence when writing the cipher, so some adjustments were made to get the answer. The man who cracked the code spent several years trying to solve the other 2 ciphers, but could not. In 1885, James B. Ward published a pamphlet entitled The Beale Papers. The publication was also mysterious. People investigated James B. Ward, but found very little evidence he existed. Only one record of him could be found. A man with that name owned a house in 1863 with Sarah Morris. Sarah Morris was the wife of innkeeper Robert Morris, who held on to the iron box containing the cipher. Both Robert and Sarah died 20 years before the pamphlet was published, so they could not shed any light on the mysterious James B. Ward. The pamphlet spread throughout the world, becoming an obsession for many. However, in the 200 years since it was published, no one has been able to decode ciphers 1 and 3. Also, in those 2 centuries, the tale of the Beale treasure has taken on many legends. Some say Thomas J. Beale, who discovered and buried the gold, never existed, and the entire thing is a hoax. The 1810 census showed that there were 2 men named Thomas Beale, but they lived in New Hampshire and Connecticut. However, many records from that time are missing from a lot of the country, including Virginia. In the 1820 census, there are 2 Thomas Beales. One lived about 12 miles from Bedford County, Virginia, where the treasure is supposedly buried. Another lived in Tennessee, about 500 miles from Bedford County. One piece of evidence that Beale existed was that there was a man named Thomas Beale, who spelled his name B-E-A-L-L instead of B-E-A-L-E, who appears on the St. Louis, Missouri customer list for the post office in the 1820s. Another theory is that a famous author is the real writer of the Beale Ciphers. The theory is that he wrote the pamphlet which made the ciphers public using the name James B. Ward, and then made up the story about the hidden treasure. That writer is Edgar Allan Poe, famous for his Gothic poetry and short stories. He is best known for his poem, The Raven. In the 1820s, Poe was a student at the University of Virginia. Poe was known for his fascination with ciphers. In 1840, he wrote an article for a Philadelphia newspaper where he requested that readers send him ciphers for him to solve. In 1843, Poe published a short story called The Gold Bug. It's about a man named William Legrand who finds a gold-colored bug and becomes obsessed with it. Legrand's servant thinks that Legrand's obsession is a sign that he's mentally unwell. So he contacts Legrand's friend, who's the story's unnamed narrator. When the narrator visits Legrand, Legrand tells him he deciphered a secret message, and the two go on an adventure to find a buried treasure. It was one of Poe's most popular works while he was alive. Poe also published two ciphers in 1841 under the name W.B. Tyler. One of those ciphers was not solved until 1992, and the other was solved in 2000. However, American author and columnist William Poundstone does not believe that Poe is the author of the Beale Ciphers. In his 1843 book, Big Secrets, Poundstone had stylometric analysis done on the pamphlet, The Beale Papers. According to Temple University Library, quote, stylometry uses statistical methods to analyze style in order to determine authorship, unquote. The analysis determined that the grammatical structure in the Beale Papers pamphlet is quite different from Poe's writing. Based on this analysis, Poundstone concluded that Poe did not write the Beale Ciphers. So like the ciphers themselves, the authorship of the pamphlet that brought the ciphers to the public's attention is also a mystery. Even though the ciphers have not been solved, this hasn't stopped treasure hunters from exploring the mountains of Bedford County, hoping to find the buried gold and silver. However, a lot of the area is privately owned, and many people who try to dig are arrested for trespassing. In the 1980s, a landowner allowed several digs to happen. However, there was a catch. Whatever the searchers found, they had to split 50-50. They did not find any gold or silver, but they did unearth some Civil War artifacts, which they sold and were able to recoup the cost of the dig. The Beale treasure has had wide media attention. It was featured on Unsolved Mysteries in 1988 and then again in 2010. It has also been featured on the History Channel show Brad Metzler's Decoded. In 2015, Josh Gates investigated the Bedford Mountains for his show Expedition Unknown. However, at the time of this recording, no one has claimed to have found the treasure or decoded ciphers 1 and 3. If this is not a hoax and the treasure is actually out there, it could be worth anywhere from $50 million to $75 million. Thank you so much for watching this video. We hope you found it interesting. If you did find it interesting, please make sure you subscribe. We'll have a new video about the paranormal every week. If you just discovered this channel, please make sure you check out our other channel, Criminally Listed. We have over 325 videos featuring bizarre but true crime stories. You can find it at youtube.com/criminallylisted. We also have a podcast about cold cases that were eventually solved called Criminally Listed Presents Into the Killing. You can find it on Stitcher, Spotify, Amazon Music, and anywhere you find great podcasts. But that's all for today. Thanks again for watching.